Hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the first release from the Criterion collection for 2023, and this is The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, a, a film from 1988, directed by Terry Gilliam. It is one of the most elaborate fantasy films you're ever likely to see. And although it's a fantasy, Baron Munchausen actually existed. He lived in the 1700s. He was known as a great liar. He would tell his friends all these tales about his war experiences, and one of his friends compiled all these very elaborate stories and put them in a book. It became a publishing sensation, translated in other languages all through Europe. So for centuries, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen was one of the major fantasy, if not the major fantasy story that there was. But I never knew him. I knew the name of Baron Munchausen. I knew there was a story about him, but it was not part of my childhood growing up in the 1950s. And I'm not sure that even by 1988, many people in the U.S. would be familiar with The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. So it's very much a fantasy. It's not. It has very little, at least obvious, relation to real life. I couldn't help but being struck by the contrast with the first film that Criterion released in 2022, which was The Celebration, part of the Dogma movement, which was absolutely bare bones movie. Very much about real life and the trauma and the pain and the agony of being alive and the family dynamics. Filmed on one of the most, deliberately filmed on the grungiest camera that they could find, digital camera that they could find. And then we have this absolutely opposite. This is just like the antithesis of the Dogma movement. This has got everything, it's got production design, it's got great actors, it's got a story that, at least for the most part, doesn't seem to have any relationship to real life. And you might argue, I think, for audiences, and the film was not a success, that there may be too much fantasy. It just careens from scene to scene, and we never really get our feet on the ground. I'm not sure that we're supposed to get our feet on the ground, but it can be a little bit, all this fantasy and these elaborate sets and this beautiful look of the film can get a little bit, you can grow a little bit weary of it. And when you learn about the production history of this film, you wonder, how did they ever get it made? I mean, it was just they ran out of money. They filmed in Spain, they filmed in Italy, but there was, chaos everywhere. Nothing worked. They had all kinds of problems with the weather, with the Spanish government in Spain. They had a location that was all set up for one of the major scenes in the film, and then they weren't allowed to shoot there anymore. So they had to go back to Italy. They had to redesign sets. The money people, the production was, as I say, chaotic. There was no strong producers or assistants on board until the very end. Somehow they got it made. And as they say, when you read about how bad it was and then you see it, you think, my God, it does look fantastic. It is a feast for the eyes. There's no doubt about it. And the adventures go through the universe. They go to Mount Etna. They go into the belly of a whale. It is truly imaginative, and there's no doubt about that. And the film is a celebration of imagination. It's a celebration of a Baroque imagination, of taking imagination to as far as you can possibly go with it. And unusually enough, there is some social commentary put into this film. It's bookended by a town that's under siege from a Turkish army, and Terry Gilliam says, I did have some idea of this was the Iraq War era, He draws on the assassination of President Kennedy at one point. He draws on a nuclear bomb at one point. But it doesn't interfere with the overall fantasy. He melds all this pretty well together. Another reading of the film, given the production problems that Gilliam had on this and his previous film, I mean, that was a true war with the studio in Brazil. But he is the Baron. He is the imaginative one. Look at the stories I can tell you. Isn't it great? All this imagination, taking you out of yourself, making you feel young again. This is what Terry Gilliam, as movie director, saw his role. And then Jonathan Pryce playing the head of the government of this town under siege. He is exactly the opposite. He is a money man. He is the villain of the piece, which Gilliam saw the studios and the production probably all through his career. He had a lot of trouble getting along with people who could be classified as the suits, you know, the money people. You have to have a great cast to pull off something like this, and I mentioned Jonathan Pryce, who's really good, but John Neville plays the Baron. He was an established and quite accomplished Shakespearean actor. He'd been in movies and TV. In 1988, he was the head of the Stratford, Ontario Shakespeare Festival, and a job he took very seriously. So when he was asked to play this part, and he hadn't really been in any films or TV during this tenure in Stratford. He said, "Well, I'll get it all planned, but this is a certain date. I got to go back to Canada." Somehow they got it done. His main sidekick through his adventures is a little 9-year-old girl played by Sarah Polley, and she's just absolutely delightful in this film. And this is indeed the Sarah Polley who was in Exotica, which came out in the Criterion collection a few months ago. Now an accomplished director. Her new film, Women Talking, has gotten a lot of great reviews. I haven't had a chance to see it yet. In 2008, they interviewed many of the participants 20 years after the making of the film, and Sarah Polley says that for her, she wanted desperately to be on the film, and she loved Gilliam and especially Eric Idle. But for her, it was a traumatic experience. All the explosions. There's so many explosions in this film. And at one point, it does look indeed like Sarah Polley running the gauntlet as explosions are coming all around her. And they spend a lot of time in the water too. So when they ran into money troubles, the production was paused for I think 2 weeks, and she said it was great. I just wanted off this set. I couldn't take it anymore. Her father was on set, and he plays a small little part in the movie. Eric Idle, Terry Gilliam was part of the Monty Python group, and Eric Idle also, and so he's one of the Baron's sidekicks that they've gotten separated, and they're all around the universe. So he's trying to reassemble them to bring them back to fight this Turkish army. He's excellent. Robin Williams, the best segment of the movie is Robin Williams, who's the King of the Moon. And they only had him for a week. I think it was originally planned for Sean Connery. Williams did it sort of as a favor, and he's hilarious. Seems to be improvising for sure in Robin Williams' inimitable way with a heavy Italian accent. He's hilarious. Valentina Cortez plays his wife, the Queen of the Moon. We go into Mount Etna, and here we find Oliver Reed as Vulcan, a sort of like a prehistoric man almost, who has this ethereal, beautiful queen, played by Uma Thurman. She's only 17 years old at this time, and the film is bookended with this scene in this town under siege, and a theatrical troupe is performing the adventures of Baron Munchausen on a stage, and she's part of the acting troupe. But you might miss her. But you won't miss her when she appears as the queen, as Oliver Reed's queen. I think she's Venus. I think she's a goddess, and she looks like a goddess. And but anyway, I won't describe it anymore because it is a spectacular entrance. We also get Sting drops by for for about a minute of screen time, maybe not even that much. You have to mention Giuseppe Rotano, cinematographer. He photographed The Leopard for Visconti, a great Italian cinematographer who worked in Hollywood as well. The big star of the film, more than anybody, is Dante Ferretti, who is the production designer. He just is. I don't know how he did it. It's just, these sets are fantastic. And he had to improvise because they would lose, they didn't have enough money for the established or what the sets they were about to design, so he had to cut back on that. They had a location they were going to film in Spain. Then all of a sudden, at the last minute, the plug was pulled on that, and he had to go back to Italy and design it and design it on a soundstage. It looks absolutely fantastic. Every set in this movie is fantastic looking. So in the supplements, this is a new 4K restoration, UHD, Dolby Vision, and a Blu-ray. Now in 2008, it was released, I believe as a Blu-ray by Sony. And Sony did the 4K restoration for this as well. So I imagine the new Blu-ray is also based on this new restoration. So they have, Criterion takes the supplements from the Sony release. It's about a 70-minute documentary that I've already alluded to, but you have to watch this because it's very well put together. We get Terry Gilliam, get some of the other actors, members of the crew, the beleaguered German producer. They all seem to dump on this producer. The studio and the money people dumped on Terry Gilliam, but the rest of the crew and the on-set crew and the actors, they blame the producer for a lot of the troubles. But he gets his chance, and it makes the film, this documentary, really interesting, listening to him defend himself. So I think the only new supplement here, and there's a bunch of other supplements, like deleted scenes with commentary, but the only new supplement, I think, that comes through on this new edition comes from David Cairns' visual essay, in which he goes through the history of Baron Munchausen, fascinating background history of what Baron Munchausen has meant in the world of fantasy literature through centuries, 250 years ago, something almost 300 years ago. We get a commentary with Terry Gilliam and Charles McEwan, who co-wrote, they wrote the film together. McEwan he's also part of the Baron Munchausen's posse that's being reassembled. It's a good commentary. They stick to the movie. They talk about all the problems and really all the joys of making the film. The inside packaging, we have the UHD, we have the Blu-ray, and one disc devoted to the supplements. Now the commentary is on both the UHD and the Blu-ray. I watched the film in UHD, Dolby Vision. It looked fantastic. I mean, it's a beautiful. I have untutored, obviously. I don't know how much you can trust me, but it looked fantastic to me. And then I watched when I listened to the commentary, I played the Blu-ray. Now, if I hadn't seen that UHD, I would have thought, this film can look even better than the Blu-ray, because the Blu-ray looks pretty good. I would give the nod to the UHD because of some of the more detailed, especially in the faces and the dark scenes, there's more detail. Some of the colors may pop out a little bit better, as they say in the picture quality scientific world. But I have not read any other, of that scientific community, as far as the bit rate and the encoding and all that kind of stuff. So maybe there's something wrong here or not. But for my on Tudor Dice looked fantastic. And we get a booklet with not enough artwork. You know, and why are they? This is about it in the artwork. And then we got a really good essay. That's by Charles who is that by? Michael Koreski, and it's excellent. It puts you know, a modern 2022, 2023, I guess now, slant on the movie, because obviously all these movies that were made in that time, we now have to have context of what, you know, things that might not, people would have noticed in 1988, but now we, you know, we have to put the failures of making movies, you know, in the context of 2022. I don't mind that. That's interesting. So all in all, a feast for the eyes, and I think a really good start for Criterion 2023. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.